You're with Julie on the Brano, a review of The Brutalist. So I'm doing I did the Oscar roundup piece, and I'm going to review a Nora. So getting these out of the way in the show, which I've already overrun. Bradley Corbet's film. Bradley Corbet is kind of one of the biggest debuts, I feel, from a major directorial artist, since the likes of Paul Thomas Anderson, and even Paul Thomas Anderson had There Will Be Blood, preceded by Boogie Nights, which got an enormous amount of international acclaim as well. The films that Bradley Corbett's done up until now, like Protect You and Me was an indie. The Childhood of a Leader was borderline an indie, and Vox Lux did get some attention and had some major people in it, but to make a film this ambitious and singular and incredible at this stage of his career is quite an astonishing achievement. Famed for introducing the intermission back into cinemas. The intermission used to be where you could go out and probably have a cigarette break, although back then you could probably smoke in the cinema, but when something is so long... this is actually only 200. It says it's 220. It says 202 minutes. I think that is probably without the intermission, actually. It's a film about somebody escaping the Holocaust who was an acclaimed architect, a Jewish architect in Hungary before the Nazis came, who moves to America and goes through the immigrant experience, which is a fairly universal immigrant and non-white person experience in America, through forming an alliance with a very wealthy man to build his, I guess, phallic representation of himself, or some lasting legacy, by building this enormous community building, including a church and a library and different function centers for people in the 1950s, while his wife is still trapped in Europe post the Holocaust, and sort of dealing with a lot of the subtle and not so subtle racism and views of people along the way. And also it's a film that I relate quite closely to Metropolis by Francis Ford Coppola, which I had a lot of time for, which was also about an architect by Adam Driver. About how an architect may see space and be an artist, and it takes time for the world to catch up with them about what they're doing. And in this case, it focuses on the architectural style of brutalism, one of the most controversial and influential architecture styles of the last century. At its heart, we get Adrien Brody, who is a very quite difficult man and very thoughtful man, and often quite a broken man, who is trying to establish a new world for his family in America when he doesn't even have his family. So at the start, we've got the end of the Second World War, and where we kept all of the Jews in concentration camps. We actually kept Jews in concentration camps after the Second World War, not in the same way that the Nazis did, but the people of America and Europe were not amenable to accepting them, and the places they had to stay until this was worked out were some of the concentration camps were used, which is all a bit awkward. And he leaves without his wife and their child, who's actually his niece. So her family has gone. His niece is mute after the horrors of what they've witnessed. His wife is Felicity Jones, who we don't see until after the intermission at all. And he doesn't see either. He ends up in America. He stays with his cousin, who has dropped Jewish heritage entirely, uses an American accent, and involves himself in the world as an American from the Midwest with a Catholic American wife. And they put up with him for a while, and they give him a job in the furniture shop, and they get a commission to build a very wealthy, like an old school F. Scott Fitzgerald kind of billionaire who owns, property all over America and has this one big mansion of his own that he loves. And they build him a library, and he does it in this modernist, brutalist style. And the guy's played by Guy Pearce, who's also up for an Oscar, as are Felicity Jones and Adrien Brody. All three of them were up for acting Oscars in this film, understandably. Guy Pearce plays Harrison Lee Van Buren, who's someone that owns multiple businesses throughout America, and is a very interesting man. A narcissist, but with a desire to, he envies the Adrien Brody character, Laszlo Toth, his artistic understanding of the universe. And it's what he wants to be that in that realm, which is why he sort of foments a bond with him, because he is a very intellectual man and a little bit pretentious about that. So when the Toth character initially meets Guy Pearce blows his stack because the library is a gift from his children to him, and he doesn't know it's happening, and he's a control freak, and he goes crazy. And he says, what the hell is this monstrosity, and kicks them all out, doesn't pay them for building it, and the cousin kicks out the Adrien Brody character for costing him all this money. But once the press get hold of this library, the cognoscenti of the artistic world of pretentious press reporters start saying this is an amazing artistic achievement. So Guy Pearce goes back to find him where he's in a doss house doing heroin, shoveling coal and doing odd jobs, and still waiting for his wife to appear, and says, look, I've read up about you. I've got books with all of your brutalist buildings in. I want you to do this public space for me on my grounds that's going to be, my heritage. And that's most of the film from that point on, is his relationship with the Guy Pearce character and the building of the building. And it made me think of the Sydney Opera House a bit, about the public animosity towards what the character is doing and not understanding it, and one day they'll understand, sort of thing. After the intermission, we get the Felicity Jones, his wife, and his mute niece arrive from Europe and take up residence on the grounds of the Guy Pearce billionaire's place. Felicity Jones is in a wheelchair. She's been destroyed by osteoporosis due to the malnutrition of being in the camps. They were all in the camps. Pretty much all the rest of them had died. And so there's a very shattering sort of relationship between the two, because he had no idea that she had gone through this and that she was now an invalid. Doesn't sound like fun, does it? So what did I think of the film? I thought it was amazing. Some of the best filmmaking I've ever seen is before the intermission. And it's after the intermission where things are uneven. But before the intermission, what I loved the most about it was how compelling it was, and how it didn't need to push any point. It made points and made you feel what was happening to Adrien Brody's character with the slightest look or a couple of words. It carried so much meaning throughout that whole section of it's perfect filmmaking. It's up for loads of awards. I hope it wins cinematography for Lowell Crawley. They used an old film stock style that's not used anymore, VistaVision, I think it's called. And it does look amazing, and it looks like they've put so much thought into the framing and the lighting and the way that everything's done. There's been some controversy about the film using AI on the Hungarian accents for Brody and Felicity Jones, saying that the vowels and everything was so hard to get right when they were speaking in a particular dialect of Hungarian that they used AI, and that caused a bit of a scandal. And then there was a rumor that a lot of the architectural drawings and everything were designed on AI, and they denied that. Whether that will have an impact, I don't know. But the music and the cinematography, music by Daniel Blumberg, are both magnificent, would easily be worthy of winning Oscars. Adrien Brody is a phenomenon in the film. If there's a problem with the film, is that sometimes it's not as deeply written as you would want. And that is, I think, like a really great actor that shows the difference between Adrien Brody, Felicity Jones, and Guy Pearce, who I love and have so much time for as an actor. I think they struggle more with the fact that their characters aren't written to the full extent they could be, because Adrien Brody doesn't need to say much. He often is just glancing. He's a difficult enigma and remains so until the end. And not a nice person, but somebody that you can kind of understand through glances and through, very short, terse words. And I think that's why, he's at that level when it comes to his potential as an actor. And Guy Pearce and Felicity Jones have both been nominated for Oscars, but they fall down more where the writing doesn't flesh them out as much as it does with Brody, who doesn't need to be fleshed out because he does it himself. The production design is just phenomenal. It's beautifully produced. After the interval, it feels like the great American novel, which is trying to be in film form. And it shows, and for the best, I think, really, overall. I don't know I think the director has been accused in the past of becoming repetitious and taking too long. I would agree that that's the case, particularly after the intermission. It meanders a bit, and I'm really picking at small faults in a near masterpiece. And the other thing is, towards the end, a couple of moments, there's a sexual assault, which I'm not sure was too literal an analogy between the way that, the rich screw over the poor or the rich screw over the worker. It felt a little bit literal for me. But there are some amazing dreamlike sequences, like the quarry of marble in Italy in the second half, which are just absolutely spellbinding, particularly with the cinematography and the music, which are absolute top-tier filmmaking. And the other bit is they have an epilogue, which is filmed in the modern era, or at least feels a lot more modern, but it's filmed, years later, when Adrien Brody is an invalid and his wife has died. And I don't know about that sequence. It felt out of step with the rest of the film, and it also felt like it didn't really resolve a lot of the stories that we've spent 3.5 hours with. But overall, it's a magnificent film with some flaws that sort of accumulate a bit in the second half, and where certainly like characters like Guy Pearce is amazing. He's really good, but I did feel like they didn't write him or Felicity Jones enough for them to be absolutely astonishing. Adrien Brody, him losing to Timothée Chamalet would be a disgrace. But I'm going to give The Brutalist a 9 out of 10.